You know that moment when you had something that you needed on your desk, and then you decide to organize and clean your desk, and that thing that you need is gone? Yeah, me neither.
Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. This episode is sponsored by Component One, makers of Widgmo. If you need stunning UI elements or awesome graphs and charts, then go to widgmo.com and check them out. Don't panic, they'll be paid for most of them. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 79 of the JavaScript Jabber Show. This week on our panel we have AJ O'Neill.
Yo, yo, yo. That's your life from Provo.
Jameson Dance.
Hey, friends.
Joe Eames.
Hey there.
Merritt Christensen.
Hey, guys.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv, and just want to remind you to go get my freelancing video at goingroguevideo.com. We also have a special guest this week, and that is John-David Dalton.
Yar! Hello.
Yar, I think that's a first.
Awesome.
It's very JavaScripty, though.
Yeah.
Very true.
Thank you for having me.
Totally.
Yeah, no problem. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, my name's John-David Dalton. I am the creator of Lodash, the JavaScript low-level utility library. I'm also a co-maintainer of JSPerf, Benchmark.js, which powers JSPerf. I'm also a Chakra performance PM at Microsoft, so I help make the JavaScript engine in IE faster.
Awesome.
I can't picture a better guy for that job.
I didn't know about that last one. I knew about JavaScript and Lodash and stuff, but I didn't know you worked with IE. That's cool.
I do. I work with engine guts all day. My bread and butter is doing a lot of benchmarking, so every day I keep tabs on all that stuff.
Awesome.
So I think we're going to talk about Lodash most of the time. I want to just talk about JSPerf for a little bit. It's amazing for testing out things. I know I've seen not lots of people. I feel like I've seen some of the implementers of JavaScript engines warn against micro benchmarks, and they're kind of like, they mean JSPerf, but they don't want to call out JSPerf specifically. Like, JSPerf is an awesome tool, but they're warning against people making decisions about structuring their code based on running this tiny snippet of code in isolation for like a million times in a row.
It's tricky when you get into benchmarks, because sometimes you do need a micro benchmark. JSPerf doesn't help you make a good benchmark, so there's lots of bad benchmarks out there.
Sure.
And so the danger of doing micro benchmarks are the fact that engines are pretty smart, and they'll detect like dead code and empty loops and things like that. So you have to be smart about what you're testing, but more times than not, I found it to be very useful, and it actually does reflect if a given snippet of code is faster. There's a lot of stuff in there that's goofy, though, like they'll test double equals versus triple equals, or single quotes versus double quotes, or, goofy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we all know that triple equals is faster.
Well, it depends. It depends. If you have the same type values, then double equals should technically be the same, because it performs the same number of steps. Now, engines do all kinds of goofy stuff behind the scenes, but the spec steps are the same.
Well, I think there's one question that the audience is going to be really keen to want to know, and that is it faster to ++1 or to 1++?
Oh my gosh!
Make it JSPerf, man.
Yeah,
one of the 100 million of them out there.
So one of the things I did with Lodash was to avoid a lot of the micro optimization myth in the library. So I did things not because they were faster on a JSPerf, but because they are my kind of style. So for example, I don't use triple equals everywhere. I use it when it's necessary. So I'll use double equals when it's necessary. Or I don't sit there and use a reverse while loop because it got a better JSPerf score. I use the one that I think is more readable. So I try to kind of push back against that. There's some people that use void zero because they think it's faster than undefined, and I don't do that. So a lot of the micro optimization stuff I kind of just ignore and go for the bigger perf gains, which usually revolves around reducing abstraction. that's where I get the biggest gains. I mean, it helps engines inline better, and overall you'll get better performance. Just remove, and with functional libraries, though, a lot of devs like to compose, and so the secret is in the library that's the base, like your core low-level library, reduce the abstraction there, and you'll get better performance. And so that's what I do in Lodash.
So when you avoid the micro performance gains, why are you doing that? Is it religious belief?
No, I don't want to, because Lodash is kind of promoted as the performant lib, and people know that I dig performance. I kind of want to lead by a good example, so not get hung up on these micro optimizations that really don't impact your performance of most JavaScripts. And so I use what is technically correct for a given scenario, and I try to keep the superstitious stuff out of the code. So it's not like religious or anything. I know that some things don't really matter, and so I don't put that in the code.
So to kind of sum up all this stuff about JS Perf, it seems like to use it well, you just have to be, I mean, it'll tell you what's faster, but it doesn't matter if the while loop is faster than
right.
the
and
other loop, unless it's in a hot loop in your code, right? So,
right, and so it gives you kind of all the information you need to know if it's a good or bad test, or if it's even relevant for your use case. I mean, if something is 80 million versus 20 million, chances are both are going to be very fast. That's 80 million operations per second versus 20 million operations per second.
Sure.
Chances are in your everyday code, it's not going to make a difference. And so you can kind of weigh that against your actual use case and then decide if it's relevant for you or not. Also, there's margin of error that it displays too. So it lets you know if there's some kind of weird engine issue. So, for example, if your GC is kicking in, or if you had something running in the background that was interfering with your test, you'll get larger margins of error that pop up and reduce your score or inflate your score. But at least you have a red flag there that says, hey, something odd happened. So, but I use the operations per second just to kind of as a real world sanity check. And like with Lodash, I've tried to kind of move away from performance being the thing that it headlines with, because that's not why I created the library. It was just kind of the icing on top. Some devs say JavaScript performance isn't my bottleneck, and that's fine too. But I think that in a low-level utility lib like Lodash, keeping things as fast as possible there without going overboard benefits the users that build things on top of it.
So we've danced around Lodash a lot. Do you want to talk about what specifically it is, in case there's someone in like some cave that hasn't heard of it?
Sure. So Lodash is another word for underscore. And underscore is a low-level utility library, and Lodash is a fork of underscore that has become a superset of that utility library. And so for those of you that may not know what underscore is, underscore was developed about 4 years ago and took off in a place where things like Prototype.js and MooTools had a foothold. So instead of extending native prototypes with methods, they bolt them onto the underscore character. And so it's underscore.each, underscore.map, underscore.filter. And as time has gone on, I've seen issues crop up where devs' needs aren't being met. So, for example, inconsistencies in older browsers, inconsistencies in API, backwards compatibility issues pop up. And I had tried to do the open source thing, which is, do a pull request, submit issues. And eventually that did not look like that was going to be enough. And so I did a talk at JS Conf last year, and the title of the talk was The Hidden Cost of Natives. And from there, basically, when I run JS Perf, I also keep track of the Twitter feeds, and I see a lot of devs saying, wow, I didn't know that a for loop is faster than array for each, or map, or filter, or index of, or bind. All these vanilla JavaScript implementations of native methods are actually faster than the native methods. So in that talk, I gave a lot of examples of that. And so then I thought, well, I could probably apply this to a utility library. And so then I started working on Lodash, with the big thing of ensuring that it's consistent behavior from your oldest supported browser to your newest supported browser. So one of the things that I try to solve is like object iteration and array iteration in older IE is now consistent even with the newest browsers. So no matter what you're using, you'll have the same behavior, and which is it's really handy for devs that have to support that older environment, because the debug tools aren't as great for those older browsers. And having to dig around your code to spot these inconsistencies, which don't reproduce on newer browsers, is a pain and cause devs to cry. So I didn't want that. I want something that is consistent, and so that's why I created Lodash. And I can get into like the nitty gritty on what the inconsistencies are, but there's blog posts on that and videos on that too. But it's basically consistent object iteration, array iteration. For all environments. That's why I created it. And then it's just kind of exploded beyond that now with custom builds and additional methods and modules now. So, yeah.
So some of the changes that you made in Lodash have actually made it back into underscore as well, right?
So I kind of like the days when libraries would compete against each other and try to outdo each other. Like I remember when Sizzle first came out, so the selector engine that jQuery uses, and Dojo would say, oh, hey, I've got a better selector engine, and they would come out. And then MooTools would go, hey, wait a minute, no, I've got a better selector. And they would each kind of go back and forth, outdoing each other. And so I hoped that when I would released Lodash, that underscore would do the same. They would say, oh, snap, I've got to go and up my game here. But that really didn't happen. They kind of just sat there. So I've started to try to pull them along, because it helps developers. If underscore gets better, it helps developers. If Lodash gets better, it helps developers. So I've tried to help developers by pulling underscore up too, and submitting issues and communicating with the devs. Like I've got one of the core devs on my instant messenger, and I ping them anytime there's a bug I find or whatever, and trying to get underscore to get better as well. And so right now I think we've got over 30 plus issues that Lodash has fixed in underscore. And are responsible for a couple of the minor version bumps that fixed issues along the way, including like a 5.1 or 5.2 or something. So, yeah.
That's really cool. It's cool that you can be competitive, but still help out like your competitor, in air quotes, It's not like, screw those guys, I'm gonna grind their faces into the dust.
The reason I forked anyways was to help devs. And so being kind of abrasive or kind of toxic doesn't help devs, and no one wins in that scenario. So this way, at least devs get a better utility lib if it's Lodash or underscore.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult at times though, because it is kind of hard to draw the line with, all right, now I've got a competing lib. How do I balance that with helping underscore out? But I think I've done an all right job at that so far. So I'll keep doing it too until they they don't want any more updates. But I've been kind of diplomatic about it. So, yeah.
I think it's really funny though. I don't know of any other projects that have a sort of competing project that actually pushes. They're pushing ahead on their competitor in this way. I mean, there are projects that I know of that solve the same problem. They just solve it in a different way. So when they forked, they have effectively said, well, we like this much about it, but we really feel like this other, thing is more important. And so when they fork, they don't maintain compatibility. They just say, well, use them or use us. And, with your API is consistent or, mostly consistent. I haven't really looked with underscore, and like we said, you basically have this fork of underscore that you use to push it forward. And I really haven't seen that approach in any other projects to push them forward like that.
Well, I'm kind of in a really cool position because our API is so similar, and it really is a true fork of underscore. If you go back through the commit history in GitHub, it eventually becomes underscore. But we're at the point now to where it's not a drop-in replacement. That's why I maintain the underscore compatibility build. So that's always there. But I'd like to see where this goes. I hope that they pick it up and kind of push back a little bit with some features and stuff, because that's fun to me. I like the competition. I like trying to outdo someone. So right now it's kind of one-sided. I've kind of stacked the features against them. So now they've got to push back and hopefully make a better lib out of it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the performance stuff. You said the reason you made Lodash was because of some of the compatibility issues with older browsers.
Yes.
But the reason, so we use Lodash at work instead of underscore, and we switched to it because it's faster. That was like the buzz that we heard about, and we tested it out and it made a difference. So can you talk about the performance? I mean, it seems like that's as big of a reason for people to use it as compatibility stuff.
So one of the things with Lodash is that you can have your cake and eat it too. If you like small files, we've got modules. If you like performance, we've got the speed for you. If you like consistency or older browser support, we've got that too. But with the performance, that came out of trying to create a pull request for underscore that met Jeremy's needs. Basically, the restriction was he would put in cross-browser consistency for older browser support if it did not hurt performance. So that was my challenge, was how do I add more bug fixes and increase performance? And so I did that by reducing abstraction. So basically, you'll have a method in underscore that calls like each and then maybe has and then a few other methods, all in a loop. And so that just your call stack just keeps building up and up and up there. And I've tried to reduce the abstraction there to where a lot of things are just a simple loop. Or I avoid things that engines have problems optimizing away, like .call and .apply in a loop. I hoist those out. And so I've kind of taken a different approach because I do deal with performance in my day job and as a hobby. I know what are the native methods to use and what are the native methods to avoid. I know what patterns to use, which give JavaScript engines hints that can help them optimize certain operations. So that's kind of what I've done with Lodash. I started off using method compilation, which kind of scared devs away a little bit at first because it was this big string that is a big template of functions with bug fixes. And so basically the idea is that for any given environment, the core methods only contain the bug fixes for that environment and not for anything else. So that means like modern Chrome doesn't get bug fixes for IE6. And that was intimidating to look through because it was this big template. And so I've kind of moved away from that and kept that inside the raw source, but on the targeted builds, it's compiled away to just regular JavaScript, so they don't see that. But the big secret there is to just remove abstraction and to be smart about the methods I use. So it's not about like avoiding all native methods. A lot of devs think that it's avoiding all native methods. It's not. I use object.keys when it's available because it's faster than a for loop with has own property checks. And I do test. We are one of the few JavaScript libraries that have a performance suite along with the unit test suite that I can track performance with each release, compare performance from build to build, from unminified to minified, to underscores, to the modern, to the compat build. And so I get and can track all these variations on performance and know when I'm regressing something or when have improved something.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That sounds really cool. Does that catch, is that for sanity checking? So like, I changed something and now the minified version is a lot slower, or is it just for doing incremental improvements?
That was actually a happy surprise. A lot of devs don't know or may not think that it's obvious that minified code dramatically changes your code. And the idea with minified code is that it's not supposed to change your performance profile. But every once in a while, I've seen bugs creep into Uglify.js or Clojure compiler that trigger de-optimizations in certain engines. And so I actually, in my build step, I undo some of the bad patterns that are injected into the minified code. So the the minified code that I produce doesn't have those slowdowns in them. And I wouldn't have found that if I didn't have the minified code be able to benchmark that and compare that in my suite. That was an accident. I tried it out and I caught the performance regression and I was really surprised by that. So now it's one of my things I do before every release is just to keep a check on that to make sure I'm not regressing there. But yeah, I do that with performance and unit testing. I've got it to where I can test with the one unit test file. I can test legacy modules, AMD modules, CommonJS, Node modules, NPM modules, the legacy build, the modern build, the mobile build, the strict build, all these builds in multiple environments. So in Node, in Ringo, in Rhino, in Norwal, in Rhino with the require flag, and I dig that. I like being able to cover all my bases with a performance suite and a unit test suite that just works everywhere.
So what do you use to actually do those tests? Do you have your own performance testing library, or do you tack onto the top of like QUnit or Jasmine or whatever?
I use QUnit, but I have a library called QUnit Clib, which is the CLI boilerplate, and that allows me to run in all these other environments. Like for Rhino, it adds a set timeout and set interval and clear timeout and clear interval, because that doesn't exist in Rhino. And so that allows me to run across all these environments. I use QUnit because that's what I had at the time. It's not like because it's the best for a given framework. I've kind of sunk into it, and it works in all my environments, and so I'm using it. I use QUnit with a Jasmine style. So I liked the structure that Jasmine gave me when I worked for Uxibu, and so I've taken that and applied that to QUnit. So I write QUnit in a Jasmine style, and so that's how I handle that.
So I have some questions about performance optimization in general. I mean, you've built a career on that, right? How do you go about making something faster in the abstract? It sounds like you just reeled off a ton of topics when you talked about how you made it faster, but say you don't know all that stuff and you're just looking at some code trying to speed it up. What do you do?
Right. So the first thing you do is profile it. So in your dev tool, I would run your application or your snippet and see what functions are slow or are costly, and then start digging into it that way. For my case, I know that Lodash is a low-level utility library. I also know which methods are popular, and so it gives me kind of a narrowed scope of what functions I should really pay attention to versus which functions I can let slide on performance. But for normal JavaScript performance issues, I would say, use a profiler, see what methods are being called the most, see where all your time is being spent, and then dig into that. And that's where JSPerf would come into, because then you'd say, okay, I know this function is hot. I know something's going on here. Let me compare different techniques of implementing that function or that snippet of code. And then you can use JSPerf to say, okay, I've reduced the function calls here and now it's better, or I've reduced .call and .apply and now it's better, or I've hoisted things out of the loop and now it's better. So that's where I would get the kind of the indication that there is an issue, is to start off with profiling and then narrow it down with JSPerf or any other benchmark utility you can use. I know devs use like console.time even, so you could even do that if you needed.
I hear like the disgust in your voice for that.
No, it's I've tried not to be one of these devs that are like my way or the highway, because it doesn't help devs out there. That's why I'm big into with Lodash, we're not prescriptive about how you use it or how you ingest the methods. One of my biggest boosts to Lodash's popularity was to enable AMD support. Turns out AMD has a terrific following. And really,
that's why Merritt got the tissues.
Yeah. And just adding a little bit of support, which came down to like 4 lines of JavaScript. Just the amount of enthusiasm and the loyalty of those devs is crazy. And so I don't think that, same with like browsers, Browserify, I support that too, because if you're saying I only like one narrow piece of JavaScript, then you're cutting off a whole group of devs, and then they end up having to reinvent the wheel or use a fork, which may not be maintained as well and may not follow as a strict release cycle as the original. And so I wanted to avoid devs having to do one-off things like that. And the same thing with benchmarking too. I mean, if you don't like JSPerf and you like your own lib, as long as you're profiling and you're actually looking at perf and keeping a tab on it, then that's a win. I would love if more libraries shipped with performance libs or performance suites of their library, just to keep tabs on it, just to know if there's going to be a regression. Even if it's not keeping tabs on the competition, just keeping tabs from like release to release, which is what I use it for mainly.
Sure. I feel like I see lots of specific performance information about individual features in some libraries, but it's never like overall this is the speed up of the whole thing. It's we sped up this specific operation.
Right.
But I really like one of the things you said about looking. So in Lodash, you said you know which functions are used more, so you spend more time on that. I think that can even apply to applications too, right? Like,
right.
Who cares if this chunk of the site that no one ever uses gets 100 times faster? If no one uses it, that doesn't make anyone's life better. So I hadn't thought about that before.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why I spend, like, one of the first methods I optimized was like the each method, because that's used everywhere, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't regress there. But then I started optimizing all the other methods surrounding it, because there's very targeted methods that are very popular for certain kinds of data manipulation. So like the difference, unique, and methods like that, I've gone ahead and optimized too. But I've optimized them for their edge use cases, which are incredibly large data sets. So like really large arrays. I've made sure that these methods perform well with large data, which it's kind of interesting because now I've optimized the common areas, and now I can go off and optimize the edge behavior as well.
So I have to ask, how do you know which ones are the ones that people use the most? I mean, are you using a highly technical technique like talking to people, or do you have some other way of knowing that?
No, it's I get it from a couple of different pieces, but like you'll see which methods are being benchmarked on JSPerf, so I can keep tabs on that and see, okay, I see a lot of people doing array iteration or object iteration or DOM selection or something, different aspects of that. And then you kind of get the feeling if you do like a code search, you'll see how many times these methods keep popping up over and over again. And then you talk to devs, and you can figure out that, oh, hey, I'll do a sanity check every once in a while and say, hey, what are your favorite APIs? I did this on Twitter a couple times too, and said, hey, just shoot me your most commonly used Lodash methods. And then, I'd get a bunch of replies, and then, all right, the more, I'd start tallying up, all right, which methods people are interested in, and then make sure that I keep those fast. Also, for me, it helps with, I do have the competition of underscore, and so I can make sure that I don't regress certain methods they are fast at. So I make sure that I'm always on top of some of their methods. Sometimes I can't be, but in generally, I try to make sure I beat them on performance.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
There are some cases where you've actually added features to Lodash that don't exist in underscore, like curry comes to mind. Are you worried at all that underscore might implement curry but use a different signature, in which case you're kind of in trouble?
So now that we have the underscore compatibility build, that really doesn't bother me as much because we can always keep compatibility there. So like right now, underscore Lodash is not a 100% drop-in replacement unless you use the compatible build, because we do things like we allow you to exit early out of each. If you return false, it exits early, just like jQuery. Our clone method, shallow clone method, clones data objects and regexes, which is something that underscore doesn't. And so there's lots of little differences there. And so if they were to do that, I would just make sure that the underscore compat build was compatible with them.
Got it. Very cool.
Yeah. And now I try to encourage a conflict-free API. So like at one point, the @ method was being discussed to being added to underscore. And we have an @ method in Lodash. And so I kind of made sure that that could be avoided. So it's not like I would bring it on, like say, hey, yeah, bring in all the API conflicts, because that makes it harder for devs that are trying to build libraries that work with both Lodash and underscore. So I've made some patches to Lodash to support common patterns that underscore devs use, because I've seen some libraries say, well, hey, we want to be able to just say use Lodash or underscore and things will work. And so the more API conflicts you have, the harder that is to do.
Got it.
So do you have, I know this is a hard question to answer, but do you have any idea of how many people are actually out there using Lodash?
So I keep tabs on the NPM stats because I found this really nice site that allows me to do that. It's going to be one of my picks for today. And it's called NPM Stat. And I can see there how many people are using it. So currently, Lodash is downloaded on NPM about once every 2 seconds. And by December, we'll have over 1 million downloads a month. And so I think it's starting to pick up. And I can look at the trends from month to month and see that it's basically just a vertical line on adoption. So we're gaining every month. We're getting more and more users. So I think It's just getting devs aware that there is an alternative that is faster, more consistent, has more features. So getting the word out has kind of been the only obstacle there. Usually, if there's been an issue where a dev can say, I like this because underscore does this better, I've made sure that we cover that in Lodash and make sure that we do it better, or we provide an option for them in Lodash. So I think from that side, we are gaining popularity. We just beat underscore actually on the daily downloads on Monday, and then we beat them again yesterday too. So we're starting to get to that point to where we're starting to pass underscore in its own turf of NPM.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about that too. It surprised me how Lodash kind of went from being in the background to just skyrocketing in use. I don't know if that's because the stats got better or what, but
I bet
crazy.
you. I think like the adoption of Grunt, and some of those other things really helped.
Which is interesting because Grunt is still using a pre 1.0 version of Lodash, so that's going to be a big win whenever they can get to the point to upgrade that too. But I can't believe the adoption. I'm very thankful for the devs that have taken a chance on it, because a lot of devs, they kind of see, if they don't dig into what Lodash is, they think it's like a Me Too library where it's a fork and all it's got is performance, and they don't dig into the consistency or the features or the modules or the custom builds or the documentation. And so that's why I've started to try to shift the focus away from performance, because performance was great for getting the word out initially, but it's so much more than that now that I have started to drop it from the keywords and started to kind of stress it less, because it really is about the consistency and features, and the performance is just the nice to have on top.
I mean, like the deep clone, for example, is just something that's so useful that
I
don't think you can even get from underscore, honestly.
And a lot of these features I get because they were asked in underscore's issues and then closed over and over and over again. So devs would continually open these issues saying, hey, what about this feature? And then it would get closed. And then another dev would say, hey, I really like this I want this feature. And so that's kind of been my roadmap for Lodash, is to see what are the features that devs are asking for but not getting in underscore, and then implement them in Lodash.
So do you have like a hook into the GitHub API where every time somebody opens an issue on underscore, you just get like shot in the back of the head with a Nerf dart?
No, I manually check up on it. Like every day I check on it at least once a day, just to kind of see where it's at.
It's definitely not as cool as having a GitHub hook.
No, it's not as cool as having a GitHub hook. But no, I do. I check in on it just to see what issues are being opened. I also check like Stack Overflow and a few other places just to see what are the questions out there. And what I've started to see now is that devs are starting to refer to underscore as underscore/Lodash. Like, instead of, it's becoming like one name, underscore/Lodash. And I dig that. I've also started seeing them use, say underscore, but use Lodash syntax for things, which is a little confusing. But we have, for example,
wait, what do you mean syntax difference?
So we have intuitive chaining in Lodash, which means you don't have to call the chain function to get chaining. It just, if you use the Lodash function and you pass it a collection or a value, then it just assumes you want chaining. So basically, if you use Lodash like jQuery, it's going to assume you want chaining, because why else would you be using it like that? And so I've seen devs kind of use that syntax and refer to Lodash/underscore, even though that syntax will not work in underscore. That's it's one of the features we have.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about this competition, because there's so much competition, for example, in browser MVC libraries, but it seems like they don't, maybe because they're coming at it from such different places, that they all have really different strategies, so they don't maybe kind of motivate each other and learn from each other as much as underscore and Lodash, just because you guys directly forked. Is there any general lesson you think that library implementers can learn on how to deal with competition, even if they're not between like API compatible things? Does that make sense?
I think competition is great, and I really get into it, and I like trying to one up. I treat it like a challenge, where it's like, oh yeah, you can't get it as fast with cross-browser support. I'll show you. I'll get it faster. And then, you work at it and work at it, and you get it. Or they'll say, well, you have this, but now your build is 3 times as big. And I'll say, oh, yeah, well, I've got custom builds now. So, wah. And so I think if you have fun with it and you enjoy it and you don't see them as like this, I don't know how devs would get it in their head.
Arch nemesis.
Yeah, arch nemesis. Yeah.
I love it.
It's all things used to help devs. So like I'm building a library to help devs, and getting into to super big arguments about that kind of stuff doesn't really help anyone. It just feeds like the trolls. And so I try to stay positive about it. And so like every once in a while I'll see people come across my Twitter feed and say, wow, you're really trolling underscore or something. And I think it's because I'm the cheerleader for my lib that it may sometimes seem like that, but I've never called them names or, said that they were stupid or something like that. I've always came at it from a dev perspective, like, is this helping devs? Is this hurting devs? Is this going to allow it to be used in more environments or something like that? So I've tried to keep it positive. Also, I think that knowing if you make a mistake, that to just own up to the mistake and fix it fast. That's what I do. Like if someone finds a bug or if someone calls me out on something, I don't sit there and showboat about it or try to like stand on my like with this thing with I'm always thinking about like the semicolon issue in Bootstrap or something.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, well,
we all know it's faster to use semicolons.
Well, with that, how I would have ended that was adding the semicolons helps devs because some minifiers broke. And so for me, I would say that falls into my, is it better to help devs or to say, no, change your code? And I'd say, no, it's better to help devs. So I think if you fix your mistakes fast and are willing to adapt, then you'll do well. So like I've learned from underscore too. Like there's a couple of things that they've done where I've gone, wow, that's crazy cool. So like with their zip method, at one point they had unzip, which was using zip internally to unzip, and that blew my mind. And so now I've done this too. And I think you can always learn from them. I've also looked at other competition too. Like there's a library called Mout, and there's other like utility libs out there, and so I look at them to see like what cool things I can implement. So for example, on our roadmap is lazy evaluation, because someone forked underscore and Lodash and created their own lib called lazy.js, where they use deferred evaluation of chained methods to get performance gains. So instead of doing like map.map.filter, where it's 200 iterations, and then 200 iterations to filter down to a collection of 2, they defer all of that and compose it in a way to where you reduce the iteration count and get significantly faster performance. And so on my roadmap is to adopt that kind of technique for the chaining style, because one, they boast as being faster than Lodash. And so my competitive side is like, okay, I've got to address that need there. And so like with Mout, they were the module lib. And so I made sure I covered that case with Lodash as well. So now you can get Lodash spliced up into AMD modules or NPM packages or Node modules all in one repo. So yeah, I think it just, a lot of the NIH not invented here, you gotta just kind of let that go. There's other libs out there that do things really, really well. And now with the code becoming modular, you can just tap into little bits of these libs that do one thing and do one thing well.
So I like how you said that, this was a little bit earlier, but you said how you optimized for edge cases where the edge case is a really large array. And I think that's really cool because like a lot of people, I don't know, if you tell me you're optimizing for an edge case, I'm thinking like, why would you do that? But it makes sense because it turns out the BOGO sort is just as fast as any other sort until you hit about 7 items, and then it starts to get really slow, So if you have little... So,
what I noticed is that I started seeing like conference talks about large data, and then issues being reported about performance issues with large data. And I've always looked at JS Perf again. It's kind of like my finger in the air, where I can say what is the current trend on performance issues. And so there was a lot of performance tests being created for large data. And so I figured I can optimize this. I can get this to where we do it really, really well. So if you do happen to work with large data, or like, if you're using D3 and Lodash, you can iterate over these collections faster, or do like a unique or other kind of operation speedy with large data. So basically what we do is we detect, I profiled to detect when the large array optimization would actually benefit users, and that's when it kicks in. So across multiple browsers at a given number, that's when I kick in the large array optimization there.
So I guess my next question becomes, let's say that I've built an app and I'm using a lot of JavaScript on the front end. How do I test the performance? Say I know that it's slow, but I'm not sure what's slowing it down. How do I find out where the problems are?
So then you would profile your code and see which methods are being hot. Yeah, someone says, didn't we already ask that? I think you did, but yeah, I would just say profile your code, figure out what methods are hot, and then go from there, narrow it down.
But I guess I'm looking for more specifics.
HTTP requests.
I guess I'm looking for more specifics. So do you plug in JS Perf at that point and start looking at what it's telling you, or?
No, you use the profile data to figure out what methods are hot, and then you take those and you can break them down from there. JS Perf would be used for if you're wanting to compare different implementations of, say, a slow method. So, for example, I've seen them do this with, I'll just say, like Backbone's event triggering implementation. They compared the versions of its performance from one release to the next to a future patch to improve performance. And so they know it's slower, and so then they'll compare different implementations of it to see which one is fastest. A lot of times when you present, hey, I'm going to send a pull request to this lib to make something faster, they'll say, hey, give me a JS perf of that to validate what you're doing is actually going to make a significant difference. So it's used as like a sanity check in that way.
So JS Perf can tell you how long something takes. It can't really. It's good for small chunks of code when you're trying to determine
Correct.
the difference between them. It's not like find me what is slow about this code. It just tells you.
No. It just basically tells you. It just tells you which snippet is faster, snippet A or snippet B or snippet C, and that's all it does. And so to narrow it down, you want to use your browser dev tools to profile to figure out where your hotspots are.
So you have mentioned some specific tricks when we talked about performance before, like pulling things out of loops or not using apply and call, or not using some natives. How do you develop that knowledge? Do you just need to learn about the different engine implementations and what things are slow? Is there a good resource for learning all that stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I've gotten that from experience. I don't know if there's a good resource that just lays all of that out for you, which is why I would say it's handy to use a utility library like Lodash that's got devs that are so in tune with performance, because you'll know that what they're doing is on the mark. But yeah, I'd say it comes from experience. I've kind of am lucky because I can follow the JS Perf tweets and mentions and look at the tests that are popular and kind of see where people are spending their time. And then I'm also lucky because I do work with JavaScript engine internals and can know at least, from IE's side or from Chakra's side and from the competition side, what they optimize for and things like that. So it kind of helps me there too. But for devs looking for resources, I'm not sure where a good list of all of these things are. I mean, that's what I do with my JSConf talks, has been like, hey, here are some things you can do to speed up your code. That's what my last JSConf talk was, where I kind of went through several of these techniques that you can use to speed up your code. And I've actually am using all of them in Lodash. So I guess I would redirect to my JSConf talk for this year.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You want to throw a link into Skype in there? Or I guess we can find it later.
Yeah, I'll find it later. Basically, my slides are really bare, so I also released a screencast with it that kind of walks you through the optimizations too. So sure. I'm still waiting for my the official JSConf video to be published, but I've had the unofficial one out almost since I got back from JSConf. So that's up too. So I'll shoot a link there. And it basically covers just a lot of things that you can do in your code. So it doesn't even have to be to like library code. These are techniques that you can do with any of your production code or your code that will give you better performance.
I kind of wanted to go a different direction, and that was to ask about these environment-specific builds. Do you have plans for, or does it exist already, maybe like a Lodash that'll wrap streams? Something more node-specific?
No, actually, that hasn't been brought up. So far, we've just done builds for like older environments and newer environments or mobile, but I haven't. Besides having the npm build and the Lodash node build, which targets the node specifically, I haven't done any other kinds of builds around that.
Got it.
I'd be interested in an issue though, or a feature request. I mean, I'm very flexible with adding features, especially because I do have a custom build. I'm not as locked into being torn about adding a specific API, because if you don't like it, you can always create a custom build or use the module build or one of the hundreds of variations on the build to create something that you'll dig.
Yeah, for sure.
So one question that I have about performance, you talked a little bit about some of these mythical optimizations that you can make. How many of the things that we hear on a regular basis are provable to improve performance versus, the ones that aren't?
So a lot of fall down to use case, but I'll tell you the ones I've avoided. I've avoided void zero. I've avoided triple equals. I've avoided reverse while loops or any kind of for loop magic where they say, no, it's this way, plus I versus I plus. I've avoided that kind of thing. Really, what it comes down to is, for me, the biggest improvement is just reducing your function calls and getting that out. I've seen some other ones too where they'll say string concatenation versus using an array and join. But a lot of those benchmarks are missing the fact that engines nowadays will defer the string concatenation until the full string is evaluated. And so these benchmarks, these JS perfs, are testing the wrong thing. And so they're not really showing you what the actual performance is going to be from using like string concatenation. And I think it's cool that the engines do this in the background too. So basically, when you're doing all of these concats, it doesn't create the final string until you do something like a regex that iterates over the entire string. Until then, it's separate string snippets. And when you use array join, that forces the flattening of the string right there because you're creating the string with join.
Sure.
Yeah. Also, things like a switch statement versus if-else. I found that the switch statement really helps for mobile, like Safari mobile specifically. But other than that, it's really not a big deal. I found some very specific like Safari mobile optimizations. So for a while, I avoided object.keys in Safari mobile because it was slower. But that was just the work of profiling. But it made enough. It was like 30% slower. So it wasn't just like micro optimization level slower for me at that point. But then again, you JS perfect and you see like, is this millions or is this hundreds of thousands or hundreds of operations per second difference? And you can make a judgment there. I would say use the ops per second measurement on JS perf to give you a sanity check on if this is really going to matter.
I think another thing that you have talked about a little bit, but haven't just come out and said, is that these optimizations often make your code uglier and harder to follow.
It's true. To read. They do make it harder to read. So that's why there's kind of like this balance I do with Lodash to try to figure out, is the performance gain worth devs going WTF over the code? And so that's kind of what I did with method compilation. In the beginning I compiled all the things. And then I got devs that actually, would not use Lodash because of method compilation, because it was too cryptic and hard to read. They couldn't grok the source and then trust the source. And so I pulled that back. And in doing so, I probably lost a little bit on performance, but it wasn't enough to make a big difference. And so I increased dev readability and still found a balance with perf. So it's a balancing act, I'd say. only do something super cryptic if you know it's going to really help. So like Backbone does something in their event emitting code where they have like, if you pass an argument's length of 4, do this. If you pass an argument's length of 5, do this, or 6, or 7, or 8. And it's this really unrolled logic. And I'd say, only do that kind of crazy stuff if you can show really big perf wins and comment the heck out of it. So even in my method compilation, I added a ton of comments to it just so devs wouldn't be as intimidated to look at the given chunk of code.
Wise words.
All right. Well, any other thoughts or questions before we get into the picks then?
I have
Fresh
none.
out.
I have some feature requests, but
Sure,
I can make those on GitHub.
Oh, okay, cool.
Won't put him on the spot.
There we go. How would you implement? I'm just kidding.
I don't do live coding. I just saw in the chat that they said async. And
I want async.
I think there is an async library for Node, and it's fantastic. So I would say they are probably well suited for that need.
I'm sorry, when I said async, I meant sometimes when you're doing really large like DOM operations, you have to chunk them on the next turn of the event loop.
Yeah.
So Lazy.js does this really cool thing where you can put in an async call and then a take. So it'll call that function every 50 or whatever times till it's out. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right. I'll look at that then. Yeah, I'm like I said, the next step for me to compete with Lazy would be the deferred evaluation on the chaining syntax.
Cool.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do the picks. AJ, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm going to pick John-David Dalton, and I'm going to dedicate this song to him.
Please
Did
don't.
you ever know that you're my hero?
Wow, that's happening.
Where's the edit button?
No kidding.
Hey, it wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't. That was all right.
Do we have the same bleep that you get for live TV swearing?
So other things. So I, with my DJ company, I put on a ball, and it was really cool because if you've ever seen The Greatest Movie Ever Sold, this was kind of like the greatest ball ever sold. So I ran around to all these other companies that are in like the wedding reception industry or in the young single adult industry and got them to sponsor almost the entirety of it. And so I want to give a shout out to a couple of the companies that helped me out that are nationwide, because most of them were just local here in like Provorum. But Home Depot, they were really cool because they let us use a generator for free, which we needed for a food truck. Sam's Club actually provided a lot of the utensils and whatnot. And then Carrabba's gave us basically a date night package to give away to the winners of one of the contests. And so actually Sizzler did that too. But anyway, so I'm like super happy that there were really cool managers that were into putting on a free event for young single adults in this area and making something that was fun and classy. Because one of my missions with my DJ business is to make more classy stuff, because things just aren't classy enough anymore, Anyway, end of rave.
All right. Joe, what are your picks?
All right. I've got a 3 picks here. The first one is the new TV show that just started up, The Michael J. Fox Show. I've really enjoyed watching it. It's pretty funny. It's not quite as funny as Big Bang Theory, but it's still quite enjoyable to watch. I'm also going to pick Skinit.com. Skinit is a company that produces vinyl sticky skins for all kinds of devices. I bought one for my first MacBook Pro. I just bought another one for my MacBook to give it a little personality. I know that the rage is for everybody to throw stickers on their MacBook as if they're a race car driver.
I've never heard it said that way, but
I really
yes.
Yeah.
we should really explore sponsored open source.
Right.
And John-David Dalton could probably get some money putting stickers on his laptop before he speaks.
Yeah, probably. But I think that something that looks a little bit nicer and represents some part of your personality versus just selling out to the corporate machine No, I have no problem with those stickers, but I really like Skin.it. I think it really made my MacBook look nice, and everybody knew which MacBook was mine at work. So Skin.it.com is my second pick, and my last pick is going to be Nodist, Nodist. Nodist is basically NVM or N for Windows, so it allows you to run multiple versions of Node and switch between versions, which is an absolute necessary because Node and other libraries love to break each other. And so being able to switch to a version of Node that actually works is just absolutely necessary. So I'm going to pick Nodist. I think it was a great project somebody put up together so that Windows people get the same love that non-Windows people get.
Which project did you pick? NVM or Node? What was it?
Nodist. Nodist.
Do you know if N from TJ Holloway Chuck works on Windows?
It does not.
Ghetto.
Yeah. So Nodist is
What about the one from Isaac? Navi, I think?
I don't know.
I mispronounced, but he's got one too. And so I've switched from N to that one.
I'll probably switch to that one if that's just because the nature of him feeling responsible for Node.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just did a Google search with reasonable search criteria, and that was what came up.
He says in his README, it will probably never work on Windows.
Right. Okay, so those are my picks.
Awesome. Merrick, what are your picks?
So we had the pleasure of interviewing Reg Braithwaite on his book JavaScript Allonge, and he actually made that book open source. So that repo is definitely one of my picks because that book is now free, and it's a terrific book. The second pick I have is actually this. Chrome is behind a flag introduced a dialogue element, which I don't know if this is good or bad, but it's interesting. Having these kinds of high-level UI elements implemented by browsers. I don't know if they're going to go the way of Alert, where nobody ever uses them, or if people will find a way to extend and use these elements. The APIs are a little bit wonky right now. For example, they're using show and close instead of show and hide. So I kind of wanted to try and direct attention at some of these implementations to get people to be able to give these guys more feedback, because it would really suck to have a poorly implemented dialogue that no one could use. And the other pick is 1Password. They released an update. It's 1Password 4 now, and it's just terrific software for managing all your passwords.
I use it.
Yeah, same. I love it.
Yeah, you have to have something like that anymore these days.
It's created some interesting conversation, because they'll say, "Hey, I use 1Password," and then someone will say, "It's not a good idea to use just 1Password for everything." And I'll go, "No, I'm talking about the software."
No way, really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So true.
All right. Sure, go ahead.
All right, cool. So my pick would be one of them is CDN.js. The maintainers are fantastic. They respond to issues and feature requests. They're working to get Zopfly support, so you can get even smaller CDN files. And every time I release, I always do a pull request to them to update my libs on the CDN. So that's one. The other pick would be modules of any kind. So AMD, ES6, or CommonJS, or the Node style modules. So if you're digging like Browserify, go for it. Now's the time, if you're going to do it, to use modules. And no matter what kind you like, go for it. And there's always cross compilers to go from one format to the other format to back to raw.js too.
What do you prefer?
Oh boy. So I took 3 months to add module support to Lodash. And so I got to learn a lot about the issues with AMD, but it was really issues with circular dependencies in my own code. So I'm going to stay out of that fight and just say I support all modules. Because I don't,
Tell me in chat what you would do if you started a new project. I'm just so curious.
Well, no, so I have UMD. So that's the first thing I add to my lib is the UMD support, so it works across multiple kinds of module loaders. And I've, in fact, in the last release or so, I've even beefed that up a little bit to support even more wider ranges of shims that people are using to support these various module loaders. So I would say go UMD if you can, and then create targeted builds. But if you do choose one, just look at having the cross compiler there for the other format, because again, if you're choosing one, especially if you're a lib dev, if you're choosing one to hang your hat on, you're closing the door to a lot of other developers. But as a project, I would say use the one you're comfortable with. As long as you're using modules, I mean, you're going to get the same kind of benefit from it. If you're more comfortable using Node and Browserify, that's great. If you're more comfortable with AMD, that's great. Or ES6 and transpiling over to regular JavaScript, that's great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I totally agree.
The last pick I have is for that npm stat site, so I'll post a link to that.
Awesome. All right, Jameson, what are your picks?
I had 3 picks today. One is music. It's an album called Ask the Dust by Lorn, Lorn. It's like organic, bubbly, electronic music. It's like dubstep without the obnoxious parts of dubstep.
You better not be talking about the drops, because those are the best part.
Oh my gosh. You and Skrillex sitting in a tree. Okay, so that's one of my picks. You should check it out. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it's obnoxious or not. But I like it, and I don't like the really screechy, grinding gears dubstep. The next pick is a JSConf talk called Optimizing for Developer Delight by Rebecca Murphy, I think. And it's just about how it's some things that an engineer on a team can do to make life better for everyone on the team. So some of it's like tooling and documentation and how to communicate knowledge and how to eliminate kind of snags that pop up. That was a really good talk. And the last one is, it's this column in some Unix magazine that I've never heard of called The Slow Winter. But it's basically this satire about, oh man, it sounds so dumb when I say this. I feel stupid. But it's amazing. It's this satire about performance optimization. It's just this guy writing. It's like Lewis Carroll was a hardware engineer and wrote the Alice in Wonderland of branch prediction. It's amazing. It's like 2 pages long, wow. And it made me laugh out loud. It's pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah,
awesome.
So those are my picks.
All right, well, I've got a couple of picks. Actually, probably just one. No, I've got 2. So the first one is, I finished Portal 2, and I was looking for another game to start playing, and a lot of people were telling me to go check out League of Legends, and I'm enjoying it. I'm still very new at it, and so I very suck at it, but I'm enjoying it. So,
you're playing the internet's best cyberbullying simulator.
It is such a bullying game, but I started playing it, and my self-esteem is at an all-time low. I almost didn't make it to the show because I was being bullied so hard last night.
Oh, really?
Oh, dude. They have like this whole tribunal review system because the community is just so bad.
We'll have to talk about this after. I've got stuff to say about that game.
Yeah, I haven't had any issues yet. Of course, I tell people I'm new and then no one will talk to me. Maybe that's it. But anyway, so but just getting in and running around and killing stuff is awesome. So that's one pick. And the other pick is a Reflector app. It's an app that allows you to do AirPlay from your iPhone or iPad to your Mac. You can do AirPlay to like the Apple TV and stuff. And now they've got the AirDrops. So you can do that to other iPhones and iPads. But it's really awesome to be able to do AirPlay to my Mac. And so then if I'm recording a screencast, then I can run through it and I can say, hey, here's how I use this on my iPhone. In fact, I did that yesterday. I recorded a 5-minute video on how I use Evernote for my mastermind group. And part of that was, hey, here's how I use it, and here's why I really like it, is because it syncs to my phone and I can do this kind of thing. Anyway, those are my picks. Thanks for coming, John. Really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I've been wanting to jump on a podcast for a while, ever since I heard you all talk with the Moo Tools guys. So.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, now you're web famous because you were on our show, right?
Yeah, hopefully this can lead to great things in your career.
Yeah, maybe a few people will hear about that project you got. What was it called again?
Yeah, we will want some props in
Tiny
future.
Dash or something.
Yeah, Tiny Dash. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll want a note in your eulogy.
All right.
Yeah. Now, before I wrap up, I do need to mention our silver sponsor, and he was actually picked today. It's Reg Braithwaite with his JavaScript Allonge, whatever. So go check it out. Go listen to the episode we did with him on the book, because it's awesome.
Cool.
Beautiful.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. We'll wrap this up. We'll catch y'all next week.